Feeling frustrated and disconnected from your teen? You are not alone. This is something we all struggle with as parents, which is why on March 27th, I'll be hosting a free masterclass for parents of teens called The Art of Non-Reactive Parenting. If you'd like a calmer communication and better connection with your teenager, this class is for you. You'll learn how to understand and identify the triggers that lead to reactivity and how your reactivity impacts your relationship with your teenager. You'll learn how to identify the triggers you have, manage stress, and use powerful communication techniques, and walk away with a personalized plan to implement the strategies at home. Click the link in the show notes to reserve your spot today. I'm Jennifer Della Quadri, and this is the Raising Happy Teens podcast, where you learn how to successfully guide your teenager into adulthood without losing your sanity in the process. Let's do this. Welcome back to the podcast. This episode has been a long time coming, and it's something that I know is going to help the majority. No, it's going to help all of you. Okay, let's just be honest here. I'm going to be talking about sibling dynamics and also talk about sibling rivalry, sibling conflict, and what you can do to minimize the impact and also cut down on the number of sibling fights that you're having in your house. This was actually a special request by someone on my Instagram, so thanks for requesting this. Great idea, great topic. Let's dive in. First, just let me say conflict in and of itself in a sibling relationship, it's normal. It's expected. And the challenge can really come up because the dynamic between siblings really changes in the adolescent years, and fighting does tend to peak at this time. So if you're here and you have an adolescent, I don't know why you wouldn't be here if you didn't, but you might be experiencing this right now and wondering what the heck happened. Why do my kids hate each other so much all of a sudden? Just know that it's very normal for these relationships to transform over the teen years, preteen years, and in adolescence. Specifically when the youngest sibling is hitting adolescence. This fighting may increase when the younger sibling tries to gain independence and no longer is going to put up with the older sibling telling them what to do. Another dynamic that happens a lot is the older sibling doesn't want to be bothered by the younger sibling anymore and says, "Get out of my room, leave me alone, I don't want you to be around." And then conflict starts from there. Another reason why there is more conflict in the adolescent years in siblings is that we've talked about this before. The frontal lobe of the brain is still developing. So there's a lot more reactivity, a lot less impulse control. You got two or more siblings with that same challenge to control their impulses, and then you light a match, whoosh, big fire. So I'm just going to start out by explaining five different kinds of sibling dynamics. I want you to listen to that and hear which one might be the children in your house, the teens in your house, what's going on. I'm also going to talk a little bit about why conflict is actually a good thing. I'll talk about why it happens and, of course, what you can do about it. So let's start by talking about the sibling dynamics. When I was in college, one of my very favorite classes was called personality. And one of the lessons was all about birth order and how whether you're the firstborn child, the middle child, or the youngest child, anywhere in between, it impacts your personality. Through my research, a lot of those ideas from that time have been debunked. They're not necessarily true. So either way, you may see it in your children, right? The typical oldest child is the one who gets all the accolades, the high achiever. The middle child gets ignored, therefore, flies under the radar. And the youngest child is the one who tests all the limits. Of course, those are just stereotypes, may not be true. But that being said, all of that plays a role in how the siblings or the brothers and the sisters in your house will interact with each other. So here are the 5 different sibling dynamics. Number 1 is best friends. They're close, they have a great bond, they share everything, they support each other, and they really genuinely enjoy each other's company. You may be listening to this and thinking that doesn't exist. It is a pipe dream. That's in a fairy tale only. But I'm here to say this does exist. And I'm not trying to brag or anything. I am not a bragger, but I am saying that this is absolutely possible. My two girls have always got along. They've always liked spending time together and playing. That doesn't mean that they didn't get in little arguments here and there, but they truly do get along really well, which is interesting because I had the same dynamic with my sister, still do. And my husband had the same dynamic with his brother, and he still does. So that's another thing that plays a part in the dynamic and the siblings is that's what we know. That's what it's always been like. Maybe that has an impact on how my girls turned out and that they get along. But that's the first dynamic, the best friends. The second dynamic is the rivals. So there's a lot of competition and conflict in this relationship. They're both just always trying to outdo each other, and there's just a lot of tension in the relationship. So they compete for things, maybe even for your attention, and they may care about each other, but the relationship is definitely strained. The third type is the caretaker and the protected. So one sibling is taking care of the other. Typically, it's the older sibling taking care of the younger, but not always. It just depends on the dynamic of the two, or three, or four, or more. But basically, one is more responsible and takes on more of a parental role in the relationship. Number 4 is the estranged. So there's distance, they've grown apart, they rarely or never speak to each other, and they may have had a falling out or growing apart, but not necessarily. They just don't really have a connection. And the fifth one is the indifferent. They don't have much in common. They don't have much to say to each other. The relationship just really isn't a priority for either of them. So those are the different dynamics. So if you hear those, identify in your mind. First, it can be helpful just to identify what's going on in your house. And then look at your own life. If you have siblings, what was the dynamic like growing up? What's it like now? Because we can learn through our own experiences and reflecting back and just being aware of your personal experience, because your personal experience can impact what's going on in your house. So now let me talk about why conflict is a good thing. It can be really hard to see your kids fighting with each other, especially if they used to get along, even if they didn't ever get along. It's really upsetting and it's hard to experience. But any relationship in a sibling dynamic, they're learning how to interact with someone at or around their age. So having conflict with someone at or around their age, especially someone that they live with and that they can't easily escape, it can be a really good thing. It helps them learn how to interact with their peers. And if these conflicts that they're having, if they're handled in a healthy way or in a constructive way, they're going to learn how to solve these problems and resolve conflicts outside of the home. And they're going to learn how to treat others with empathy. They're going to learn how to deal with differing opinions and negotiate and compromise. So keep that in mind. When you see your kids arguing, know that there can be a benefit to it if it's handled in a healthy way. Now let's get into why the conflict happens. There's a list that I'm going to share with you, but what can be helpful is just to understand what's at the root of the conflict. So beyond just they're in an argument about this one thing, if you're noticing that your kids are constantly at odds with each other, what's really going on here? It's really important to sit and reflect upon that and see if you can even identify what's happening. So some of the common issues are jealousy. Maybe they're jealous of one another, whether they know it or even admit it. Number 2 is they may be in competition with one another. There's showing off or bragging going on. And sometimes that competition, the one who's feeling competitive may not even realize that they're feeling competitive. And maybe one of them doesn't even know that the other one does. But that can be what's going on under the surface. Number 3 is they're trying to get attention from you as the parent. And number 4 is all about fairness. So specifically, if one of the siblings thinks that you favor the other sibling, or that the other sibling gets more attention or more anything than they do, that may cause some resentment and some underlying strain. And it definitely will impact the relationship. And now on to, I did mention the role you play in it. Research has shown that parenting plays a big role in contributing to sibling rivalry. So favoritism, even if you don't mean for it to, it can happen. And it's actually quite common. It's only natural as humans that we're going to connect with some people more than others. And this is true with your kids, whether you want to admit it or not. And this changes throughout the dynamic of parenting. You may already be nodding your head thinking, okay, yeah, I felt more connected to this child when they were this age. And then I felt more connected to this other child when they were this age. Just know that it's there. It's okay for it to be there. There's not judgment around it. It's just when you're aware, you're better able to address potential behaviors that could be adding to favoritism and then also some type of resentment from one of the siblings or more of the siblings. And the research has actually also shown that favoritism, it can negatively affect mental health of all the children in the family. So for the one who is not getting as much attention, there can be resentment. And the one who is getting the attention may have more stress just to achieve and to live up to expectations. So here is how to address sibling conflict in your house. First, encourage them to resolve it themselves. It's not like when they were little and they needed your guidance on all of the things. When you were always stepping in, that was important when they were younger. But if you step in now, you're robbing them of the opportunity to practice problem solving on their own. That's not to say that you can't step in. Absolutely do, especially if they do not know how to resolve conflict on their own. And if you do step in, I recommend that you use the 7 steps to resolve conflict. I actually shared these 7 steps in episode 89, which is called Navigating Conflict with Your Teenager. I'll put a link to that in the show notes in the bottom of this episode. So when you step in first, you're going to help them understand what it is that they're arguing about. Just let them have a chance to share without talking over each other. And maybe even try writing things down. Avoid getting into the he started it trap. So stay neutral, stay impartial. There's no blaming here. Because if one feels like you're taking sides, if anyone does, it's going to bring up even more conflict. So give them a chance to calm down and know that the discussion won't be nearly as effective if emotions are high. So when this conversation is taking place, give a little space to take a few breaths, calm down before the discussion begins. And then also make sure that compromise happens and that they're each getting something. Offer suggestions if they can't come up with any on their own. So if you are stepping in, those are all strategies I recommend you use. Now, here's what you really want to know: how to reduce the fighting in the future. Because yes, conflict may be happening, and just stepping in and resolving one conflict at a time, it can get old and it's going to wear on you. You are wanting to reduce the fighting so that it's not as much of a problem as time passes. So the first thing, I touched upon this already, and that is to treat them both equally. Avoid comparing them to each other, saying things like, why can't you be more like your brother? Which is kind of just like in your face, a type of comparison. But there's also more subtle comparisons that fly under the radar, like, oh, when your brother was your age, he was blah, 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 blah. It's basically saying the same thing in different words. So notice if you are favoriting one another or even just your energy around them is more positive and more uplifting than when you're around the other. Awareness is a huge step. And then it's important to show your affection equally. Give them equal face time. It may be hard, especially if they're not really wanting to have one-on-one time with mom and dad. Like that's normal for the adolescent years. But even if it's not, we're going out and having an activity together, just the amount of attention that you spend to each one, even just sitting at the dinner table, giving them each equal FaceTime and your attention can go a long way. Another really great strategy is to not label your children. You might be doing it in your mind, and you can do whatever you want in your mind. But if you do it out in the open, it has a negative impact. And know that as humans, your brain, it's natural that your brain is wanting to categorize things. It happens with our children too. There's the outgoing one, the smart one, the athletic one, and other less positive labels like the stubborn one. Or this is kind of out there and just funny. But my kids brought this up when I told them I was doing an episode on siblings. The knife chaser. I'd never heard that before. But my daughter explained, one kid is always the knife chaser. Not literally, okay? I'm talking figuratively. The one who figuratively chases the other one around with a knife, meaning like is the one that's doing things to the other sibling to just rile them up or to set them off. So when I say knife chase, that's what I mean. And I had to share it here because I thought it was kind of funny, like wrong, but funny at the same time. Sometimes wrong things are funny. But avoid the labels. Either way, just avoid the labels. Definitely don't call your kid a knife chaser. Okay. Parenting 101. Another really good strategy is to provide opportunities for them to connect on neutral ground. So positive situations, something they both enjoy, for example, watching movies, playing games, exercising, doing creative things like playing music or creating art. Even this is kind of a weird thing, but they can connect to join forces against you in some ways. Like if you're creating this list of chores that they need to do, they may, band together like this sucks. Why do mom and dad make us do this, right? So that's another way that they can connect on some neutral territory. Also, having family meetings, it could be a really great way to connect and just talk about things when emotions are more neutral. It's a really nice strategy to stay on top of things. And then also modeling conflict resolution for them. It's not always possible, especially if you don't have conflicts with other people when they're around. But if they are, it's a really good way to model how to stay calm, how to set boundaries, and solve problems in a constructive way. So if you have a partner in the house or even with someone at work, you can talk about these things. Explain, like, these are conflicts that happen, and this is my approach that I'm taking. So that it's not setting an example of when we have conflicts, our anger rises out and we just say whatever's on the top of our mind. And so if you find yourself being easily triggered or even just triggered at all by people in your house or in general, highly recommend you attend the masterclass that's coming up, The Art of Non-Reactive Parenting. That's going to help you so much, not just with non-reactivity in your home, but just in general in your life. So definitely sign up for that, which leads me to my last topic, which is when to get support. So let's say you've tried all of these things and the fighting is continuing. It may be a good idea to find someone outside of the home to support you with it. Or if you're finding the fighting is regularly aggressive, physical, or crossing the line into bullying, definitely maybe time to find outside support. And if the conflict is taken over and it's really negatively impacting the family dynamic, hire a professional to help you sort through it. You don't have to figure it all out on your own. So there's family counseling, there's individual counselors for yourself, your partner, another parent, or the children, the teens. And if they're resistant, start with finding support for yourself. This is something I've helped many of my clients with, and I can help you too. To learn more about my parent coaching program, click the link in the show notes. Then you'll be taken to an application where you can answer a few questions about your situation. Then from there, you can schedule a time to meet with me and see if coaching is a good fit for you and your family. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. If you liked this episode, I'd like to invite you to join Raising Happy Teens, my free online community for parents of teenagers, where every week I host Ask a Coach. You bring your parenting questions, and I provide expert advice and coaching. Click the link in the show notes to join today. I'll see you inside.